All right, welcome back to the Coach Rob Show. We are here on Saturday, January the 18th, 2025. Jimmy Carter passed away a couple of years ago, and I want to get into some of the details of some things that I experienced with him as president and him as leaving as president in 1981. Before I do that, I want to mention this portion of the Coach Rob Show is brought to you by the Linda Lane team and Benchmark Realty. Linda is an expert realtor who has been in the real estate game for over 20 years in the Middle Tennessee area. If you're a first-time home buyer and you're looking for your dream home or you're looking to sell your home, Linda is my recommendation. She's the perfect combination of a joyful and sweet person who is a delight to work with, and she is a bulldog in contract negotiations and a detailed person when it comes to coordination of contingency items and managing the legal and financial pieces of the home buying process. My wife and I have worked with Linda on several occasions. She helped my in-laws relocate to Franklin, Tennessee from South Carolina, and she helped both of my adult children purchase their first homes. Get in touch with Linda at Linda Lane at thelaneteam.com. Put Coach Rob in the subject line as a promo code and let her know that Coach Rob got you in touch. That's Linda Lane at thelaneteam.com. Work with Linda and experience stress-free home buying. You'll be glad you did. Okay, 1980, I am going into the fourth grade in the fall of 1980, and I'm going to a school where my mom is the music teacher. My homeroom teacher in fourth grade was Lynn Piper. Lynn lives in St. Petersburg, Florida now, and has grown kids, and I have sort of stayed in touch with her. I've got to see her a few years ago when my 24-year-old, I think, was 9 years old. We went down to Tampa, went to a Bucks game. There was a day that we came to school, and we came into our fourth grade classroom, and Miss Piper told all of the kids who had brown eyes to sit on one side of the classroom. And I have brown eyes, and so I was a brown-eyed kid. It was about half of us. So we sat on one side of the classroom, and all the kids with green eyes or blue eyes got to sit on the other side of the classroom, and we thought that was a little bit strange. And then we started realizing that the brown-eyed kids had certain jobs, and the blue-eyed kids and the green or the non-brown-eyed kids had other jobs. And it seems like the brown-eyed jobs were always the dirtier jobs, the least desirable jobs. And, you know, the other kids got to do things first, and sometimes the brown-eyed kids just didn't get to do anything at all. And I didn't really notice a lot of these things. They weren't that big of a deal to me until it came time for recess. And when I was, 9, 10 years old, about the most important thing in the world to me was PE and recess. Okay, it didn't affect the PE class so much because we were the different teacher, but when it was recess, when it was time to go out on the playground, and the brown-eyed kids had to sit and watch all the other kids play. The brown-eyed kids were not allowed to do that, and so that got my attention because that was very, very painful for me to watch these other kids get to go do something that I couldn't do just because my eyes were brown. We also had a journal that we wrote in just about every day. She told us to write down how it made us feel that we had these strange rules when we came to school that day. And I expressed a lot of anger and being upset. And particularly, I believe, if I'm remembering right, I expressed that I really, really disliked the people who did not have brown eyes because they got to do stuff that I didn't get to do. Really, yes, because they were different from me, but mainly because they had access to certain privileges that I didn't have. Well, you probably figured out where this has gone. She was giving us a lesson in civil rights as 9 and 10-year-olds. The first time I ever heard John Lennon was from Lynn Piper. Lynn Piper came to school one day and said, John Lennon has been shot. And all of us kind of looked around and we go, well, who's John Lennon? I know the Beatles were already way past their height of fame, and we were interested in things like Duran Duran and Michael Jackson, I guess. I guess Kenny Loggins was big. ELO? I really liked Olivia Newton-John. I was in love with her. But we didn't know who the Beatles were. And so later on, I learned a little bit more about that and who John Lennon was and so forth. But the main thing that is related to Jimmy Carter's death and how I learned about Jimmy Carter is she told us that we learned about the Electoral College and what that meant and how that worked, and a little bit of a sort of a government lesson. We learned how voting worked, and we learned how states had different representatives, and we learned about the three branches of government. But we learned about voting, and in November of 1980, when it was time to vote, she told us that voting is usually a personal thing. Some people don't want to talk about it, but she was willing to tell us her own personal preferences and why she made the decisions that she made. And she told us that her favorite candidate for president was a guy named John Anderson. And John Anderson was the independent. John Anderson was her favorite candidate, and she told us after the election that she changed her mind and she voted for Ronald Reagan because she knew that her vote for John Anderson wouldn't have mattered. It would have been a vote for Carter, and she was not in favor of Jimmy Carter, mainly because she felt like he was a weak leader. And we know what happened. We know Reagan won. We know that the Iran hostage crisis very quickly ended before inauguration, and actually the day of inauguration, the hostages were set free. But that's obviously it's not as much of a story about Jimmy Carter as much as it's a story about a teacher and how a teacher can impact a group of kids. I don't know if other kids were affected by her in the same way that I was, but I'm sitting here at the age of 54 talking about something that happened 44 years ago as something that changed me and changed my perspective on the way the world works. Teaching and parenting, it's easy sometimes to underestimate and not value to its fullest the impact that we have on young people. You never know what's going to stick with people and what's going to change them forever. And those lessons are priceless. And that impact, to be able to have that type of an impact on young people, is priceless because it lives far beyond your own life. And it's an amazing thing. So thank you to Lynn Piper for that. If anybody is listening to this who happened to be at that school or experience Lynn Piper or another teacher that might have impacted you, I would love to hear about that. You can always find me on my YouTube channel or social media. You can find me on Facebook, on Twitter X, on Instagram. Please DM me or email me anytime, coachrob@wgso.com. Tell me your story. I'd love to hear it and talk about that more as the shows unfold in the future. Okay, we're going to come back after the mid-hour break, talk about football and movies. Thanks for being with us on The Coach Rob Show.